I'm Jim Lubben. I'm at the School of Social Work. I'm also the director of the Institute on Aging here at Boston College, and I'm very happy to be here for this event today. We have another treat for you for the second half of the program, is that we're going to be looking at different lenses, if you will, of the aging experience, looking at ethnicity and immigrant status and so forth and so on. So when we look at the kaleidoscope of aging, we sometimes think of aging as if it was equal across the board. And in fact, in the old days, it used to be that if you were old, you were poor. In fact, before Social Security and before Medicare, Medicaid, and so forth, being old pretty much created a fairly homogeneous aging experience, which was not at all pleasurable for many people. We now have a situation where quite honestly, for a number of different reasons, there's increased heterogeneity among the aging experience. So we cannot assume that just because somebody is old, they're like another person who happens to be old. And what we're doing today is that we're looking at sort of that kaleidoscope of the aging experience. And we're very pleased today to have a very distinguished panel of people who are out there in the real world doing this work. I should tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a professor emeritus at UCLA, where I spent 20 years looking at topics largely of East Asian populations, Asian and Asian American populations. So I've done quite a bit of research looking at, if you will, intergroup differences in the aging experience. But my wife was a geriatric nurse out there, and so she always said that though I talked about it, she did it. And so in many ways, I feel like it's deja vu because I'm going to be talking a little bit about it, but we have three people up here who are actually doing it. They're out there in the real world of practice and engaging in some of these important issues that talk about this kaleidoscope of the experience. The first presenter is Irina Rutman from Jewish Family Service, and she's a program coordinator and a case manager there. We also have Chang, who's from the Greater Boston Chinese Golden Age Center to look at the experience among that population. And then Saida Abdi, who's a clinical social worker researcher at Children's Hospital, is going to be looking at another sort of lens, if you will, in terms of the aging population. Now, the format for this session is that each of them is going to present for 10 to 15 minutes. Some have slides, some don't have slides, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But we might take a few questions after each presenter so that you know, some important thoughts don't get lost. So anyway, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Irina, and if you want to come up here to present, that'll be fine. Part of my role is timekeeper, so if you see a hook coming out. Okay, very good.
Hi. So, before I start talking about my work, I would like everyone, please close your eyes and imagine that you are somewhere where you've never been before. Nothing smells the same. You don't have the same clothes as like before. There is no music, no language, and you don't know anybody. And that's how you should start and operate and provide for yourself, have food, housing, and medical insurance. That's how my people feel. Operating in unknown, unfamiliar. And when I see that title here, Invisible, Unheard, and Undeserved Minority, invisible and unheard, it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult to be old, difficult to age, but when you are an immigrant, it's like 3 times more difficult. So I have been working in Jewish Family and Children's Service for almost 9 years. And Jewish Family and Children's Service has been serving families, elderly, and children for 150 years. We're going to celebrate 150 years of dedicated service to the community. It is the only agency that has been around for such a long time. supporting families and immigrants, providing things from food to medical insurance and many, many other services. And I feel privileged that I can work with such a dedicated, competent, and caring coworkers. I serve as a case manager in the Department of Schechter Holocaust Services and as a program coordinator for New American Services. Many of my clients are double. They are New American Services and Holocaust survivors and victims of Nazi persecution. So you know that little difference. Holocaust survivors, people who were in ghetto and camps, and victims of Nazi persecutions were persecuted, but not in ghetto and camps. The Russian-speaking population in Greater Boston is about, that's what I found, about 100,000 residents. In New American Services, I serve about 100 new clients every year. That's not talking about already established clients who also call with their new problems. And I also I have a base about 80 to 85 clients in Holocaust Survivors Department. So many clients came here as refugees between 1975 and 1990. And after that, they started arriving as legal permanent residents to reunite with their families. And the story of immigration is similar for very many people. It's getting out of former Soviet Union, away from discrimination, away from danger, away from economical stress. It always leads to breaking the family because not always the family comes together. And sometimes first the younger portion of the family comes and then the elderly people come. Sometimes they come together. So the reason I know 100% who I deal with and their stories and how they came here, because I did all the same things. I came here in 1990 with my husband and son, and my mother, the only surviving relative, she came here in 1993 as a refugee. So my mom is a concentration of all clients I have. So I know exactly what they go through, what they think, even before they open their, even before they open their mouths, I understand what the problem is, why they talk this way, why they're upset, what they need. So the majority of the elderly who came here, they never worked in this country. You might think that, well, it's good, they come here, they don't work, they may enjoy whatever life gives them. It's very, very hard, number one, to be connected with their children and grandchildren. If children, like I consider myself a child because I still have mom, so my mom has no clue what I do, even though I talk to her about it, but still, she never worked. She doesn't know what resume is, what being laid off is, what unemployment is. My son, who still speaks Russian pretty well, has children who don't speak Russian anymore. It's a huge disconnect. It's very, very hard for elderly to feel like they are connected to their own family. I'm not even talking about being disconnected from the whole world around them. So the first big problem for the elderly here is being completely isolated, not only from their family, but isolated from the environment. It's language barrier, which I always think is slightly exaggerated, but on the other hand, they can't go out by themselves, for example, to the store, if it is not Russian-speaking store. They can't go to the specialist and talk about how they need heard, because they need to explain it. Um, so I would just say that people many times who deal with elderly, they get impatient. And the number one feeling that elderly person feels is being dismissed in a very bad way. Not being heard, not being understood. Nobody wants to listen more than 2 minutes. And people have an idea when the elderly person comes and opens the mouth and wants to talk about their problems. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Go right, left, and straight, and you will be there. Especially in our age when we are all, I hope nobody will be offended, we're all screen addicted, we are visual, we don't listen. We don't use our ears, which we have two. We don't use our ears twice more than our mouth. So, especially elderly people, even when they have pretty good command of English, they feel unheard, not listened, dismissed. There is also a huge mistrust in social services. Well, I know for sure that many of my clients could have a great benefit from social services, such as counseling, or group therapy, or being more social in a mixed environment. Language barrier, number one. Being in a counseling, what am I, crazy? I'm not crazy. I don't need a psychologist because there is no distinction between psychiatrists and psychologists. And there is nothing wrong to be slightly cuckoo, as I say, because that's what we are. Now, we will all have problems which is difficult to cope with. The most challenge comes from government offices. Government programs have a great presence: Social Security, food stamps, Medicare, and Medicaid. Granted, Massachusetts comes ahead of every other state in a country because we had almost universal medical insurance since 2006, when nobody even thought about it yet. But imagine when the elderly person, even with a good command of English, comes to Department of Transitional Assistance to apply for food stamps. Not only it is terribly confusing, people who work in public offices, they have a great caseload. They don't have time to be nice, considerate, sensitive, and listen to what they're told. They're just chop, 3 sentences out. Because I only have 2 hands and 1 head, I can't, unfortunately, go with every single person to those offices where I try to make it nicer and smoother and not to give people such a bad impression of what it's all about. So many of my clients are denied food stamps when they are seriously eligible, because people in that kind of offices, they are completely not prepared to deal with immigrants. And I found that it's very, it's very frustrating, especially Department of Transitional Assistance and Social Security Administration. When I do come with my clients to Social Security office, I found that employees of Asian descent are much nicer and much more patient with elderly. It's like a part of their culture. Unfortunately, part of our culture is impatience. Okay, you come here, just tell me simply, fast, what do you want, and yes to this and no to that. It's extremely frustrating. So what I found the most challenging part of what I do is advocating for my elderly clients in public offices. And as I said, unfortunately, because I'm the only one, I cannot go with everyone to the office. And also, because those offices are so cut in employee staff, they just can't deal with that, which creates a lot of problems, a lot. From not giving people food stamps to cutting their SSI due to misunderstandings and lack of knowledge. For example, when Social Security Office employee wants something related to Russian government papers from the man who was born in Belarus. And because it's a former Soviet Union, but it doesn't exist anymore. Russia is one country, Belarus is another country. So I have to resort myself to responses like, can you please go to the Canadian government and ask Canadian government for that document? If you are American citizen and they say, well, that's two different countries. Yeah, that's also two different countries. So but we are on one continent. That doesn't make us one country with one government. So it sometimes, it's not only frustrating, but elderly person may have an increased blood pressure or the condition nearly to the stroke, where, well, I think that it leads to unnecessary admission to the hospital. It's just more money. Maybe the money would be better spent if we train, or somebody would bring it to the attention to train the workers to be nice, sensitive, and understanding to immigrants. So to conclude, when I think about it, what our profession needs to have to reach for better, to have better results. Number one, the gathering like this is wonderful, where we can brainstorm and exchange the ideas. What would be the best way to bring these problems to the community leaders, into the public offices? The dream achievement would be to meet with public offices representatives to give them the most frustrating examples of disconnection between the public worker and the clients they serve. I would love also to have volunteers, somebody who would volunteer to go with my client to Medicaid offices, Department of Transitional Assistance offices, and Social Security offices, just to be there, maybe not even open the mouth, but just to observe, to give the third person, to be like a third person who is present there, so that some employees wouldn't feel so kind of free to get away with everything. And the wonderful thing would be to have mentors who would be assigned or to be friends with immigrants who come to this country and even live here for some time, who would give them not only knowledge of English, but also knowledge of ways in the society. What's the difference between cultural demands and cultural ways, and how to get adapted better, how to assimilate, how to feel more that we belong here, not only we just came here and still continue to live in our little communities. And also involve schools in teaching more about what aging is. That aging is about loss of freedom, loss of independence, loss of friends, loss of our abilities, loss of lots of things that we could do before and cannot do anymore, because no matter what age you are now, whether you are 29, 39, 49, we all move to that direction. we are going to be in place of our elderly immigrants, which we serve very soon, and it's much better alternative than just die young. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Irina. When I mentioned we were at the same table for the previous session, that my wife worked with a large Russian immigrant population, you can appreciate Irina's first question was, does she speak Russian? So, obviously she's looking for additional support, and you could see that would be an important factor in her agency. We're now going to look at another population that includes a large immigrant population, and that is looking at Asian American population, particularly Chinese population. Chang has an MSW from George Warren Brown University and Washington University in St. Louis, Regional Coordinator, Project Director for the National Asian Pacific Center on Aging, and he's the Assistant Director for Greater Boston Chinese Golden Age Centers. So.
First, I want to give you overall, I guess you just know about Asian is growing, basically. Okay, the largest group is Chinese. Of course, we also want to look at the Massachusetts. In general, percentage-wise, only 5.8%. But you will see the very interesting certain concentration in metropolitan area. Middlesex, Suffolk County, Norfolk County, especially for those cities such as Acton, Lowell, Lynn, Malden, Quincy, has a significant number of Asian. You actually see more and more your neighbor move in as an Asian, okay? You probably live in a very nice house in the suburban. You see more and more people move in, okay? Of course, you look up what's the concentration. Boston still will be the largest one, but percentage-wise, 8.97. Quincy, actually very interesting, you see 24%, almost 1/4 of our Asian live in Quincy, okay? Same as other cities, you can see this number. In this area, Newton, Brookline also have a very significant number, 11%, 15%. See, this Asian is living in this area, especially metropolitan. If you go into the western part of Massachusetts, much less. You can see most of the Asian tend to believe in metropolitan area. Why? This is another number tell you the top 10 of the city and town has greater increase in the past 10 years. People never thinking about Acton. How come Acton have so many people move in? Okay, well, no clue. Okay, probably people understand Low or Modern, the traditional area has a good subway system. Like Low, why we have a much higher number of people living in Low? Because 20 years ago, refugee resettlement program tend to find a place, a city and town, as more affordable. Also has some more so-called blue-collar job available. So that's the reason Low Lynn has a certain number of Asian because of refugee resettlement program. Other cities like Quincy, Malden, traditionally they have the subway line. Asians are very practical. We don't buy car, okay, because you know how much it costs your car, okay? Insurance and everything. So we have to be practical. We have to be rely on public transportation. That's how that started as Quincy, Malden. But people live in Acton, Boxborough, all those things. Why? Anybody know a reason? School, yes, you're right. Why? Because Asians love school, love education now. We just feel very important. What we can achieve, most important is a lot of all parents, all grandparents, they have a very low education, but in the cultural sense to tell you, how can you achieve better life in the future through education? That's a strong belief. So you see why BC have so many Asian students. Because you have a good school. Okay? When we're talking about Asian elderly, you have to talk about LEP, limited English proficiency. This is so-called federal government definition of LEP. And when we work with Asian elderly, same as Russian community elderly as well, very high percentage they are LEP. Okay, so this is one of the things you have to be understand. Language is the first, the most important difficulty for most of the elderly. Okay, and do you know Title 6 of 1964 Civil Rights actually mentioned this, the language access is part of a discrimination. What that means to us, it is a tool for social worker, practitioner, and advocate in certain level. If each community reaches so-called critical point, so-called 10% in general sense, you have to address about the language group in general. So this is very important. You need to know, because this is, in your area, you will see more and more people coming in. I'll give you a tool. So LEP over 26 million speak Spanish, so and so. I think that's most important, just know. Numbers increase, okay? Because I only have 20 minutes. I have to spend a little more time on the other side. So meaningful access is most important. And as provider, you have to make sure you provide, you don't ask about, do you ask about, when you work in the field, do you ask the family member provide an interpreter? Sometime happen. Or maybe the elderly feel they have to bring someone, otherwise no one will help them to address certain issue. It's not right. It is our responsibility as provider to provide so-called adequate service that include address about the language issue. All those communication, interpreter, server, translation should not have no cost for all client. That's very clear. So most of what that means to us, do they get adequate information? Do they receive service benefit? Basically, they are qualified, okay? They should have no different than any other senior who are 65, 70, whatever, basically. Should not have any difference in general terms. So LEP, this is what we're talking about. Boston, Chinatown. How many people have a chance to go to Chinatown, enjoy food? Raise your hand. Yes, I love you, because we love food, okay? So Boston, Chinatown not just represent as just a food, also is a gateway to many immigrants, refugees, when they come to this country. Why they come in this country? And also need to talking about when they come in this country. Very clear. If you look at the Asian, primarily based on my Chinese American experience in general. So if you look at that, they have a major reason is seeking better life. Same as many, many immigrants in this country, been several generations, most Americans basically pursue better life for they coming to this country. This is the same thing as Asian. So when they come, they have different timing, okay? Like Chinese actually has been settled here much longer, way back to 100 years ago, when they come in to help up to build a railroad, okay, like that. And that's one period of time. After World War II, because communism occupied China and so, so basically you see a certain number of people started to come into this country based on refugee. 1975, Vietnam War, you see many Southeast Asian coming to the country based on refugee status. So they are different timing when they come. Also, where they come from. Some come from China, some come from Southeast Asian, some from Asian Indian, so and so. All have a different places. They also represent different needs and situations. We cannot just group it all in together. When we group it together as Asian, because just a political reason, other than that, you have to address each subgroup have different issue. You also see that traditionally also see certain people, people tend to believe in the better community is those people who come into this country seeking better education. So you can see people coming to this country seeking advanced education after they graduate because there are certain technique, certain knowledge they're able to continue to stay. So this is the people we're talking about. When you see the immigrant community, you actually see a very opposite direction. One is the group has very pretty much very good, stronger education background, so they come into this country seeking better education and hopefully get a better life. We also see the blue collar type. That's pretty much come from so-called family reunion. 1980, they passed family reunion that you allow immigrants to bring their parents to come to, or maybe a family member to come. So there are two different waves of the immigrants in general. One is to represent much higher advanced level. So you will see they are moving to pursue their American dream. First, get my education. Second, find a job. Third, find a wife. No, I actually have a wife already. So you're looking for buying a house, get a car, move to those community has a good school. That's one of the group. They actually, we call it 1, 2, 3 step. Another step is people tend to be labor level. They don't have that much education. They basically come from sponsored by their family. They typically work on the restaurant, garment, all those things. They work long hours, 12, 14 hours. They don't mind. They mind, but they don't have any choice. So that's the situation. So those kind of people tend to go into so-called Chinatown, Japanese town, Vietnamese town. Why? Because those areas provide at least support with the language services, okay? And if I ask them to suddenly move into Newton, they were not able to survive. Plus, they could not afford it. But so they move into those traditional area and try to work so hard, make sure support their kids. Hopefully, one day they can move into the next level. So that's first. The second level, they move into those areas called Brighton, Austin, Malden, Quincy. They have a subway line. They started to buy those. They also have a lot of inventory about multi-family houses. You see that? Okay. They know I was not able to afford buying a single-family house. I would buy a multi-family house. So the reason is I rent one unit, another unit, I can rent it out, so I can self-sufficient. That's the way. So they're moving to those areas. And hopefully by reach their kids' level, they're able to find a better school district. They move to Brookline, Newton, so-called 1, 2, 3 step. For those blue-collar type of immigrant, they typical this is the path. For those people who are seeking advanced education, coming to BC, graduate from BC, get a master, whatever, and get a better job, they're able to go into a little bit, jump to one step to next step. So you can see the difference here. Okay. All culture, emphasis about family. Everything talking about is family, cannot talk about me. Okay, this is very different than American culture versus Chinese, Asian culture. So everything talking about, well, I have to do whatever I can to work for my family. That's one thing. Emphasis, harmony. Typical Asian don't argue. When you have an Asian client, when you talk to them, 90% is, yes, I know. Yeah. Do they really understand? Not quite. Because we raise as never challenging authority. We raise to be respect to that and also make sure you don't argue. I maybe not 100% agree, but sometimes that happens. So when you work with the Asian clients, with Chinese client, you have to understand whatever you say, you have to make sure they're able to absorb, also to repeat that, make sure they really understand. When they knock their head, doesn't mean they really understand, okay? Say no, say yes, doesn't mean really yes, okay? A lot of times we don't show off, okay? Because it's, remember when we do a social work, we do a so-called discussion group, sharing the support group. What do you feel? So-and-so. In our culture, we don't show off feeling. Sorry, I cannot say too much about that. So because it's a shame if I'm saying that. That is shame to my family. So that kind of traditional value actually influenced about the process, especially when you work with LD. Of course, when you're working with the younger generation, my generation, okay, I'm younger generation too. So because we got a better education, we have to change. But you have to understand when you work elderly, that's very different. Also very clear, many Asian groups, they are man is the first, okay? In the old time, female should be one step behind me, cannot be working the same way. That's the way the culture tell them. We still can see that in Korean community, in or Japanese community happen in this country, okay? And a lot of time, parents live with their children. This is what the parents expect. 2 or 3 or even 4 generations, that's what we believe. But in reality, is it true? Can we really do that? Only 5 minutes? Okay. So that has been changed because the so-called cultural shock. And if you look at many Asian family, because if they don't really have skill set, it's very difficult to find a job. And actually, female in the family willing to do whatever they can, but as the man's side, husband's side is harder. Husband will say, I only can do this kind of thing. But female, because they feel they have strongly family responsibility, they're willing to do anything to support a family. And men actually struggle because men have a hard time to find a job, especially they don't have any skill level in general. So this is one of the things changing when they come into this country. Female actually become a very critical role in the family compared with the man. But tradition say man still, you are the man, okay? So female actually has multiple responsibility, not just financially, also talking about supporting family, raise the children, wash the dishes, cook the food, all those things, okay? So we actually experience certain so-called depression, okay? And in our community, people don't say that. We also have an issue come out as so-called abuse situation, okay? Because of the struggle about the different roles. So this is very difficult about that. Housing. Ideally, people try to pursue that. For the elderly, it's harder. Many elderly, especially in the 90s and 2000, many elderly coming to the family reunion when they come to the country, they actually feel they are helping their children to raise their grandchildren so that their children can go to work. In this case, but after their grandchildren grow older, they no longer have that kind of functions. They feel they become useless. They could not have any contribution there to their family. And a lot of times they have to rely on their children, grandchildren to talk to someone because they don't speak the language. If they live in the nice house in the Western, they don't drive. They live in a prison. They don't have a chance to talk to anybody. So it is a struggle for many immigrant elderly when they've been here longer and older, become frailer, okay? They want to seeking housing instead of relying on their family, okay? So housing become the critical needs in our community for people, many senior, they're looking for housing, affordable housing. Transportation, again, we're talking about elderly, 95% of our elderly, they don't drive. And when they reach a certain point, they're even not able to use public transportation. Okay, so language, again, and also talking about neighborhood concentration. You can see certain neighborhoods do have a certain concentration, but you will not see any concentration in other suburban area, okay? And in this system, if you don't find a number, you are not exist, okay? If you don't raise your voice, you are not exist. So become challenges to many providers to find out those, when you work in the suburban area, you don't see that concentration. It's very difficult to group it together to development program for those needy elderly. But it will be easier if they are in Boston, they are in Quincy, in Malden, like that. So that's a different situation. Funding. Overall continual funding is being cut, or called level funded. For instance, we are funded by the Older American Act, Title III. That has been level funded in the past 15 years, okay? So what that means you don't have enough funding to support that, okay? And also, a lot of time, people don't really trust government agency in general, okay? I have 1 minute. And for the many community-based organizations, especially like grassroots organizations, it's harder to compete with the mainstream organization because my staff overwork. They really don't have that much time to do advocacy, writing a grant, doing so-called program development. So not like some agency, they have a grant writer. So this is very different in the real world. Okay, so I think I just want to stop here. So if you have a question you can ask, we can talk about that. But I just want to share with you, when you work with elderly, most important has to be understand their cultures. You have to be sensitive, and hopefully you can speak their language. That would be the best. Thank you.
We oftentimes forget, if you will, the diversity of our older population and how important it is for us as social workers to make a special attempt to make our services, our programs responsive to this kaleidoscope of experience and to include this population into our services and into our lives. I think you also probably heard through these three different stories the rich resource that these individuals bring. I mean, their experiences, their knowledge, their experience, and how that could also enrich our own lives. So again, how about another round of applause for our speakers, and thank them all for the